Cullen wrote in and said, in your libertarian view, are you satisfied that even with removal of state control, billions of other people will still suffer at the hands of the market system? A system which is itself an indirect form of control and which, in an unprecedented age of technology, is already technologically redundant. That's from Colin.
That's what we call begging the question. How you doing, Colin?
That's what we call an incredibly long question, actually. Sorry, but
That's fine.
Michael put me under a little bit of pressure to come up with a question, so it's a little bit of a mouthful. But I'm sure you're well able to digest it. How are you, Stephen?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm well. How you doing, man?
I'm very good. It's great to be able to talk to you. Obviously, I've seen many of your videos, and I really applaud your efforts and the way you're changing people's minds about things. I think is fantastic. So well done on that score.
Thank you. All right. So what is a market system? What do you mean by that? Because that's very that's a facet that shines a different rainbow light on every different brain, it seems. So tell me what you mean by a market system.
Okay. Well, really what I'm talking about is actually the money and the trading system that we use. I know you're a fan of deregulating and leaving a hands-off market system, but I'm actually talking about...
Fan is an annoying and manipulative way to put it, just so you know.
Pardon? Say that again, please.
Well, just saying I'm a fan of something is kind of an annoying and manipulative way to put it, because I've either made a good case for it or I haven't. But saying I'm a fan implies that it's some emotional prejudice on my part, like Apple versus Windows or something like that. I just really wanted to point that out. If we can keep the digs to a minimum, I think we'll have a much more fun conversation.
Okay, sure, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, I apologize for that. Anyway, so really getting back to my point, the market, the trading system that we use obviously is based on money. It's based on exchange of exchanging like for like. I'm pretty much advocating that this system is now redundant, that we don't actually need to exchange things anymore because technically we can create abundance.
All right, but hang on. Before we get to what... Sorry to interrupt, but before we have to sort of take this step by step, otherwise it's going to be a mishmash. So are you saying that the market system is where people can voluntarily trade things, and they can trade goods for goods. They can use barter and all of that in a market system. It's just that some people choose to use money. Obviously, most people choose to use money. So help me understand because when you say a system, it sounds like something sort of designed or created or something which we're a piece of machinery in. And in a free market system, then people can choose to give things away for free, which is, of course, what most parents do with their children. In fact, what all parents do with their children, at least when their children are young. They can choose to give things away. Mm-hmm. They can choose to trade labor for labor. They can choose to trade good for good. Or they can choose to use money, or they can choose to use no money. I mean, there's nothing that imposes the necessity of using money in a free market system other than the fact that the vast majority of people find it extremely convenient. So I'm trying to understand what it is that you mean by a system when people are free to use any medium of exchange or no medium of exchange that they want.
Okay, well, in the defining a system, we're talking about something which has created itself, and the system has evolved of itself, and that was originally predicated on scarcity in maybe in more primitive times, where it was difficult to find things and it was difficult to make things, and obviously we invented an exchange paradigm, for want of a better word. I'm really advocating that this whole the notion of exchange is actually technically redundant, because the scarcity that is actually was originally predicated on actually no longer technically exists. We've always seen the rise of automation and mechanization over the last couple of hundred years, and we see that that more and more what is actually happening with this automation is that it is really just benefiting a smaller and smaller few, as it's sort of the money is funneled upwards, so to speak. So really what's actually happening is that the automation and mechanization that's supposed to actually liberate humanity, I suppose, is actually almost doing the reverse, and it's actually benefiting a small few and leaving the rest marginalized. Well, in terms of the actual market system itself, I'm really referring to the whole the paradigm of exchange. I believe that this the notion of exchange is actually something that's no longer necessary, at least certainly for basic goods and commodities and the basic necessities of life. We can argue maybe about whether trading is good for luxury items or not necessary items, but certainly for the basic the ingredients of living a good life. I think that this is all perfectly possible without using any medium of exchange whatsoever.
All right. I'm not sure what was that your speech? Was that a statement? There was no question in that, and no further explication of what I asked for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what you asked for is what I'm describing as a market system. As explained to you, the market system is a system that has evolved itself, originally predicated on the notion of exchange.
No, please don't repeat yourself, as if, first of all, you're historically incorrect insofar as that the market system was not around when things were the most scarce, right? Like in a hunter-gatherer system, there was no free market system in the way that we would understand it today, with sort of private property rights and a stock market and the accumulation of capital that is necessary for the kind of investments that improve worker productivity, the creation of steam engines and lathes and the internal combustion engine and the robotics and automation and so on. So if you think that the free market system evolved out of scarcity, you'd be incorrect, because for the 99.999% of human history, scarcity has been the norm, like grinding god-awful scarcity. But the free market system has really only emerged out of the last, maybe you could say, 200 years. And as the market system emerged, it tended to eliminate the bottlenecks of scarcity that characterized almost all of human history. So the idea that the market system evolved out of scarcity, or that the market system is there because there is scarcity, I don't understand how that explains the vast majority of human history where there was no market system and there was incredible scarcity. But I'm happy to be corrected, of course.
Well, what I actually meant was, and what I said was, that the market system evolved out of the exchange paradigm, which is based on scarcity. So first you have scarcity, then you have exchange, and then evolving from that, then you have this gargantuan money exchange machine, which is what we have today. So it's just an incredibly more complex.
Just you're adding just words. I don't know what it means. You say there's a money exchange machine. Now, if you're talking about what we have today is not a free market system, because the government, of course, controls the vast majority of the economy. It controls the very foundation of trade, which is the government-run monetary system, the central banking monetary system. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the vestiges of the free market that are currently, let me finish, the vestiges of the free market that are currently being ground into powder under the weight of this fascistic central banking, god-awful central planning / socialist system that we have at the moment. Or if you're talking about, what we have now, then we're not talking about the free market. And I'm obviously very critical of that as well. If you're talking about the free market as a sort of theory and what may have been more prevalent in the past, say 50 or 100 years, then I just need to know what it is that we're talking about. Are we talking about the current system, or are we talking about the free market system as a theory or as a concept?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm talking about both. Then I mean, if you want to make a distinction between
sorry, you can't use the same word to describe a voluntary exchange of value, right, and private property rights. You can't use the same word to describe that and coercive central planning by governments. Though that's like saying that the free market and communism are exactly the same thing, and I'm going to refer to them both in exactly the same way. That is like a doctor saying that health and illness are exactly the same thing, and the conversation becomes incomprehensible then. So I just need to know which one you're referring to.
Okay, well, if you want to actually just hear me out when I'm speaking, that would help. Certainly what I'm intending to say between the difference between a market system and between a free market system What I'm actually proposing is something that renders both of those ideas, whatever is current today and whatever exists in theory, both are technically redundant, because we don't actually need to exchange anything in order to provide everyone with the basic necessities of life.
Okay, so you're not going to answer the question as to which you're referring to, because you believe that both central planning and a free market system are both, you keep using the phrase technically redundant, and I don't think that actually adds anything to the statement, but you believe that they both can be superseded by a non-trade based environment. So you're putting them both in the same. I just want to be clear. I'm not criticizing. I just want to be clear that you're referring to anything where either private money or Bitcoin or government fiat currency or any sort of currency or any sort of exchange-based trade is equally bad. You don't sort of see any difference whether it's the government that's controlling and organizing it around at the point of a gun, or whether it spontaneously emerges from people's voluntary choices in a free trade environment.
Right. Okay, no, I absolutely agree with you that the free market in theory with the hands-off approach is certainly better than the monster that we have today. So let's start there. That certainly I agree with that, and I agree with your points on that. However, I am also saying that if we want to talk about freeing up the market, then we should really be talking about going one step further and actually freeing humanity from the actual scarcity-based paradigm, which is actually artificially imposed. Now, what I would like to suggest is, if some of your listeners, I don't know, are familiar with something like the ideas of resource-based economy, or if they've looked up the Free World Charter or the Venus Project. We have
stepped in the theory once or twice, and I had a debate with Peter Joseph, which we can link to below if people want to. So I've certainly been exposed to the ideas in the past, but just before we go charging on, you brought up something which, again, I'm sort of trying to understand, that scarcity is not a fact of life, but scarcity you feel is somehow imposed by a system.
Certainly in the current system, absolutely, scarcity is artificially imposed. I mean, we could have a number of factories producing. Sorry?
Do you mean? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm really trying to understand where you're coming from, and you keep sort of charging on to the next thing, which is. I'm sorry, I have to keep interrupting you, but I just need to understand where you're coming from. So, are you saying that all scarcity is artificial?
No, of course not. I'm saying that much of the scarcity that we experience is artificially imposed, and artificially imposed by default in the fact that the market system obfuscates people from actually getting the things that they need.
You see, you keep using these obfuscates people from getting the things that I don't know what obfuscates means there. Do you mean that there's a wall between it, or I'm trying to understand what? So let's first try and figure out what scarcity is artificial and what scarcity. Let me finish my question. Let's try and figure out first, if you say there is some aspects of life where there is scarcity and there are other aspects of life where the scarcity is artificial, then which aspects of life fall under scarcity, the scarcity reality or paradigm, and which aspects of life is the scarcity artificial? Okay,
right. You're being very over semantic here. Really, I'd rather actually get on with something more interesting points. But really, okay, obviously
no. Hey.
Physical. Excuse me. Can you let me finish, please?
Wait. You said that there's scarcity.
No, you weren't waiting for me. So why don't you let me finish?
No. You cannot. If I ask you a question, please. No, I will not let you finish, because if I ask you a question and then you say, well, Steph, you're being over semantic. You say that there's a division in life. You say there's scarcity. I say, well, is it all scarcity? You say, well, some scarcity and some not. I ask you which is which, and then you accuse me of being over semantic. That's kind of a dick move, don't you think? I'm asking you to explain your theory. I'm giving you room to do it. I'm giving you a public forum to do it in. And it's perfectly reasonable for me to say, since you're talking about scarcity and you say, well, there's some scarcity and some not, I'm just curious how you know the difference, or what is scarce and what is not in life. And then saying, well, Steph, that's over semantic. I just want to move on to something more interesting. This is a philosophy show, man, which means that we have to know what we're talking about. And my audience has to know what you're talking about. We can't just charge on to our manifestos. We actually have to define things as we move forward so everybody has some idea what's actually being talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it would really help if you're going to let me finish my sentences, otherwise there's not much point in me even wasting my time here, Stefan, to be honest with you. Now, if you just let me
accusing me
explain
of being
when I
rude
get to
when
the
you
end
say
of my
that I'm being
sentence,
over-semantic.
now you're doing it again. So, excuse me, you're fucking doing it again. Can you let me finish, please? Okay?
Go for it.
Seriously. Fuck's sake, man. Okay, right. You want to talk the difference between scarcity that's existing in nature and that is physical in nature? Yes, of course it exists. There is artificial scarcity imposed on us by the market system. For example, I don't know, there's plenty of water in the world, but we got to pay for our water. So this is kind of, it's preventing people from accessing water that they need. Okay, in theory, maybe that's not a great example. We could use other things like basic foodstuffs, which are actually in plentiful supply and which will get thrown away day after day in landfill because people don't have the funds to buy these, and it doesn't get to the proper distribution point. So really, you can say that if the artificial scarcity I'm talking about is that if people don't have the money to buy the thing that they need, then that is a form of scarcity, even though the actual thing that they need is clearly abundant. You understand?
Okay, so you brought up food, but you dropped it, right? Because I think only 1% of the water on the planet is fresh water, and water is... Sorry, you brought up water, and we dismissed that. So you're saying that there are some people who buy food and throw it away because they never end up eating it, and there are other people who don't have food, even though they're hungry, and that's an example of scarcity, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. It's artificially imposed scarcity because the money or the market or the exchange system, whatever you care to call it, is actually an obfuscation to them from obtaining that which they need. Okay, you understand? So it's okay. If you have the money to get it, then it's not a problem. If you don't have the money, it's a problem. Therefore, it is we could call it reverse scarcity or something like that. So the thing that you need is there, but you can't get it because somebody is telling you can't have it.
Wait, hang on, sorry. So wait, somebody's telling you can't have it. Okay, let me just, I'm trying to really sort of wrap my head around this, and appreciate your patience with this. Okay, so let's say I live in England, and I want a banana. And let's say there's a guy in Tahiti.
Chile.
I don't know if you grow bananas in Tahiti. No, South America. There's a guy in Argentina, and he picked a bunch of bananas, but his bananas are turning brown, because he just never got around to eating them or whatever, right? And so I am in England, and I want a banana, but the bananas are currently in Argentina. Now, clearly, the amount of energy and cost it will take to ship me just those bananas and the time it would take to get them before they browned off to the point where you couldn't eat them, is that an example of what it is that you mean?
Well, no, I suppose you could strictly say that is a physical barrier between one person getting the banana that's at a long distance away, I suppose. But then if you okay, it's kind of a bit of a confusing example because on the one hand, okay, we obviously have the technology and the expertise to transport that banana from Argentina to UK. So I suppose you can argue then it's technically possible. Yeah, of course it is. Yes. But the artificial scarcity that I'm talking about...
Sorry, let me just make sure I understand. So that Argentina has an excess of bananas relative to its needs, otherwise they'd never be able to export any. And England has a deficiency of bananas because it's too cold to grow bananas there. And we assume that England has an excess of, I don't know, oatmeal or whatever it is that England exports to Argentina. I know with Germany it's Nazis, but with England, let's just say it's oatmeal. So, of course, in the free market idea, let me go with an example that I'm a little bit more familiar with that I think Bastiat talks about, or Locke. Anyway, so there's England and there's Portugal. So England is really good at producing wool because the climate there is good for sheep. And Portugal is really good at producing wine because grapes grow well in the Portuguese climate. Now, Portugal can also grow sheep. You can raise sheep in Portugal and make the wool, but generally it's more efficient for England to grow to raise the sheep and to make the wool and then trade it with Portugal for wine because it's easier to, well, you can grow wine in Portugal, you can't grow it in England. You can raise sheep in both places, but it'll be easier and cheaper for you to raise the sheep in England. So there's an example of sort of what's called differential advantage, or there's a number of different technical terms for it. But there's an example of how a particular location will only be good at growing one thing, or maybe only best at growing one thing. And another location is better at growing another thing, and then they trade for sort of mutual advantage. Now, that would not be scarcity. That trade actually brings abundance, because it brings wine from Portugal to England, which England otherwise wouldn't get because it wouldn't be able to grow the grapes to grow the wine. And then what it does is it brings better or cheaper or higher quality wool from England to Portugal in exchange for the wine. You know, whether it's using the medium of money or not, it's not particularly important. So in that situation of trade, it would seem to me that abundance or more variety flows into both countries through the medium of trade. But is that not how it would work in the way that you would view it?
Absolutely, and one of the problems that I find with discussing things with people like yourself or people who are advocates of the free market is that they expound economic theories which are some things that kind of sound okay on paper, but they actually almost have no relevance to the real world, if you don't mind me saying so. Obviously,
are you saying that you can't buy Portuguese wine? Sorry, are you saying that you can't buy Portuguese wine in England at the moment?
I'm saying, Stefan.
Hang on, let me have a look on a website in England and see if we can get ourselves some Portuguese wine. Let me just look it up.
Sorry, can you stop wasting time here and let's just try and listen to my sentence? It'll be really useful. Well, my point, Stefan, is in your little microcosm example there of exchanging wool for wine. Okay, let's just assume for the sake of this conversation that there's only wool and wine in the world. Okay, and let's work on that, because we're talking about a theory here. Okay, we're not talking about it in practice. What I'm saying is that that theory there is going to be predicated on whether there's going to be sufficient demand for wine, or there's going to be sufficient supply, there's going to be sufficient demand for wool, etc., and whether the value is like for like value, and can Portugal get enough wool for the amount of wine that it's prepared to send to England, etc., etc. What I mean is that all these things, the sort of exchange theories that most people use to defend the market system are really nothing more than, just middle-class theories which actually have almost no relevance to the real world and people who are living in abject poverty, the people who can't access the basic goods that they need to survive and to live a good life. And it's not good enough, as far as I'm concerned, just to blame governments or corporations and saying that we've just got bad people there, we've got to get rid of these people, or we've got to completely go anarcho-capitalism, because you're still not removing the obstacle to what people need, which is the whole notion of exchange itself. The fact that if I don't have something to give you and you have something that I need, that I can't get this thing from you because I can't give you anything. This notion basically
hang on. Okay, I don't mean to interrupt you, but if you're going to just filibuster, I have no choice. But so, are you saying that there's no way to get something from me if you don't have something to trade?
Absolutely, yes, of course, and that's the tragedy of the system.
Hang on. Let's have a conversation. Don't just speech, okay? So, are you saying that you said at the beginning of the conversation that you have listened to a lot of my shows?
Mm-hmm.
And did I charge you for that?
No. Did I charge you to listen to them?
Sorry, let me. So there, you received a lot of value from me without having to pay.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. That's good.
My daughter receives value from me without having to pay. I give a fairly substantial amount of money to charity, and have conversations with people without charging them a penny. I've never charged anyone for a conversation in the entire history of this show. And so the idea that you can't get value in a sort of free market environment without having something to trade would kind of be counteracted by the conversation that you're having at the moment and the shows that you've consumed through this medium. Would that be fair?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but I mean, we're not talking about conversations here. We're talking about food. We're talking about basic necessities of life, of living, that almost like several billion people in the world are having difficulty accessing to. And applying the sort of neat little middle-class economic theories and saying the world will be right if we just do this and this and this is not cutting it, I'm afraid, for the majority of people in this world. So
what is a middle-class economic theory? I don't. You keep using that phrase. I have no idea what that means.
Okay, because well, that's as I time and time again. I run a group called the Free World Charter. Okay, maybe you've heard of it, but obviously I run into debates with people because I'm advocating a moneyless society, and people obviously have got lots to say about that, as you can imagine. Of course, one of the things that people say is, well, yes, like what you would say, that all we have to do is remove the obstacles to a fair exchange system, and that if I have something to offer you and you have something to offer me, then we both exchange and we both receive something of more value than we had previously. Yeah, this is the theory. This is how it goes. But it does not take account of the people who don't have something to offer in return for something that they need. For instance, I mean, how many, countless families living in poverty who have almost nothing to offer just to get the food for themselves. Okay, this is just a simple example, but also you can also apply this example up the entire scale of to middle class or society, wherever, where people don't have access to get the things that they really need to have a really good life.
Okay, but on a basic level, Colin, hang on. Are you a father by chance?
No.
Okay. Well, did your parents charge you rent, and did they require labor from you when you were a little child growing up?
No, of course not.
Right. So human beings only exist because there is charity called parenting in the world. This is the only reason that you and I are having this conversation, is our parents gave us stuff for free when we were too young to earn it. So this idea that somehow we have this giant machinery that catches everyone and it's all based upon not giving things to people for emotional reasons, there would be no human beings, because you'd look at that and you'd say, a baby? I mean, unless I'm part of Parenthood, I don't know how I can make much money out of that. A baby, what economic sense does that make? They cost $100,000 or $200,000 to raise, and you can't guarantee they're going to give you a penny back. They're a terrible investment. So the only reason that human beings are alive is because human beings decide to give to others, namely their children and other people as well, as a result of charity. So I don't know how everything becomes part of a free market system when the only reason that there are people to inhabit that free market system is because of voluntary charity.
That's parenting, Stefan. Okay, it's not actually working in the labour market. Obviously, the parents, one or both of them, usually both of them in this system, have to both go working 9 or 10 hours a day and generally miss out on all the key events of their child's development as a result. So you could argue conversely that the actual market system is actually robbing the parents of their right to be with their children, which is really what most, certainly what mothers should be doing. You know, it's better to be with their children.
Okay, so hang on a second.
Well, but unfortunately,
so you can't just, Colin, if we're going to have a conversation, you can't just make points and keep moving, right? Because it has to be a conversation. I think otherwise you can just go filibuster and do your own podcast, right? So if you're going to say that the free market system is robbing parents of their capacity to spend time with their children, then I think it would be a little tough to explain it historically. So, for instance, in the post-Second World War period in America, let's say, for a lot of people in America, you could very easily raise 3, 4, 5, or even 6 children on the salary of one person, of course, usually in this case, the man, one person working. And this is when there was far more free market than now. Now, of course, what happened is women were lured by a bunch of socialist feminists. They were lured into the marketplace and promised the endless rewards of being yelled at by people on a customer service line or something like that. And they ended up being taxed, and they ended up being taxed, and they ended up being able to tax the people who took care of their children, and that's not a free market environment. I mean, the amount of taxes that families are paying now, basically one person works just to pay the government, whereas before you could raise a family very, very well in a middle class income on one person's salary. So if you're going to say, well, the free market robs parents of their capacity to spend time with their children, it's a little hard to square with the fact that when there was much more free market, say 50 or 60 years ago, parents could spend a whole lot more time with their children.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. Yeah, and I agree completely with the notion of what happened after World War II was obviously somebody had a brilliant idea to create this consumer culture, and it's very successfully perpetuated to this day. But fair point. Obviously there was more time in a freer market system. There is more time for parents. But in general, the fact is that people have to, one or at least one of the partners has to actually be active in the labour market to provide all these lovely free goodies to baby and co. So it's not actually charity in as much as everything is for free. It's because the child is getting those things for free because daddy has to go out and work for it, and he has to pay for those things. Rather, I would suggest, I mean, as absolutely the idea of parenting and children getting things from the parents for free is absolutely correct. And of course, it should be right, but it should be wider. It should be everywhere that the community provides for everybody. And this is really, really easy if we just make a few small changes in our way of thinking. And of course, we all have to do it together. It's not something that one little group of people can do. It's something that we all have to simultaneously agree on. If we
the community should provide to everyone. I'm not sure what that means.
Pardon?
I mean, so for instance, in 2014, Americans gave over $350 billion in charity. That's almost $3,000 for the average annual household contribution. That's actually gone up 7% since 2013, and that's as a recession continues to sort of grind on and on. But when you say, I just wanted to sort of point that out, that there is quite a lot of money floating around in the charitable area. But when you say that the community should give everyone stuff for free, I'm just not sure what that means. So if you can help me understand.
Okay, well, let me start from the beginning, Stefan. Maybe we've go off on the wrong foot. Like I say, I have a group called the Free World Charter. We have several thousands of signatories from all over the world, people who are agreeing with the idea of prioritizing community and nature more so than we do now, and removing the money/market system as being an obfuscation to the quality of human life, and actually creating abundance for all. Okay, it's pretty utopian, it's pretty heady stuff. But I thought that maybe some of your listeners may be interested in actually exploring some of those ideas, because a free market capitalist system is, for me, like it's certainly better than what we have today. But for me, it's not far enough. For me, we as human beings, we're perfectly entitled to live a full and wholesome life on this planet, and everyone should be entitled to that. And it only takes just a small change in our daily attitudes and our daily routines to actually make that possible, I believe.
Colin, do you remember my question?
No.
Okay. My question was that you said that the community should provide everything for free, and I asked you what that meant.
Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Well, so obviously, based on what I said there, then the idea is that if we're not using an exchange system, we're not using money, then all the communities provide for themselves freely. What do you think about that?
And that's because we have. I'm sorry. Say again.
What do you think about that? What do you think about having no money?
What do I think about having no money? I think it would be a complete. I think it would be a complete economic suicide. I think it would strip nature of its precious resources, I think that millions or billions of people would starve to death, and I think we'd go back to the Stone Age as a civilization. Other than that, I'm actually good with it.
Really? Yeah. You think that would happen? Why? Why are you basing that idea from?
Oh, gosh, where do we start? Okay, so all human desires are infinite in general, and all resources are finite.
Human desires are infinite. Are your desires infinite?
Hang on.
How many?
Are you going to ask me a question? Do you want me to give an answer? We can go back and forth. I thought you were asking me to explain.
Okay, well, if you want to go through one step at a time, but human desires are infinite. How many biros do you own?
How many what?
How many biros do you own?
Oh, biros, pens, like pens?
Yeah, pens. Yeah,
well, let me put it to you this time. I never quite have enough time in the day to get everything that I want to get done. I would love to live forever. I'd love to live in perfect health. I'd love to never age. I would like wonderful things. That would be great. I'd like it if I could exercise in my sleep so that I didn't have to waste time during the day. I mean, I'd like it if I could see you in person rather than merely go over Skype. I'd like it if if we could have a holodeck. I'd like. I mean, all of these things. I mean, when do we ever say, "Oh no, let's stop developing computers because they're fast enough"? I'm sorry.
Why not? Why don't you deserve these things? Why don't everyone deserve access to all the best that humanity has to offer? For fuck's sake, there's no one else telling us what to do on this planet. We're all here, all together, doing this one thing, and we have a bunch of guys in one corner who are holding all the equipment and all the goodies, and a bunch of starving people on the other side.
Colin, you asked me a question. Would you like to give me room to answer it?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the question is why would it be a disaster? Now, the question is, in the scarce resources that we have, how should we apply our scarce resources? And the scarce resources, you could say they're oil, they're copper, they're whatever, it doesn't really matter, because the scarcest resource is life itself. The fact that we're mortal, the fact that we can only be in one place at any given time, the fact that we can't do 10 things at once. And so the fact is that we are mortal. And the question is, how can we best apply our time to be of most service and value to humanity? And the question is, how do we measure that? So there's lots of things I could do with my day. I could cut a rap album. In fact, you can find some remixes of me on the web doing rap. I could become a hairdresser. I could try and become a tooth model. There's so many different things that I could do. And one of the things that, of course, I've tried to do is to figure out where I can be of most value to the world, given the scarce resource of time that I have. And one of the ways that I can guide myself through that is to figure out how much can I get paid. And again, we're talking about a free market environment. Now, if I tried to do a podcast and I made 1 penny a year, then that clearly would not be providing that much value to people as a whole. If, on the other hand, I do a podcast and make $10 million a year or some crazy amount, right, then that clearly would be, especially if it was voluntary, if it was donation-based, but even if it was sort of advertising-based or whatever, that is an indication of how best to apply my resources, because that's how much value I'm providing to other people. So if somebody has a choice and says, well, I can be a haircutter or I can be an architect. Well, being an architect is usually more challenging than being a haircutter, and there is a greater demand for the more limited skill sets of architecture than there is for haircutters, and therefore I'm more likely to get paid more by being an architect rather than a haircutter, which tells me that if I have the capacity, I should go be an architect rather than a haircutter, because it has more value and more service and more positive effect in the world. The exchange of money is merely a recognition of the value of your service to others. Right? You can't make money in a voluntary environment without actually providing service and value to other people. You can go be a mugger or you can go be a politician, but you can be a really good mugger and be a politician. But in a voluntary environment, the question is, okay, so you talked about biros or ballpoint pens earlier. Okay, how many colors of ballpoint pens should there be? I mean, it's crazy. I didn't know this stuff that much, I guess, when I was a kid. But, my daughter goes into a store and it's like apparently there's pens where you've got like 8 different things you can push down to get different colors. How many of those do we need? Well, there's no central planner who can ever tell you that. And you can go out and try and stimulate demand by creating advertising and so on, but there has to be some sort of demand for people to even give you money to go and create advertising, to go and try and create that demand. You have to do the market research ahead of time. And so in the incredibly complicated question of how are the finite resources, from life to raw materials to talent to intelligence to ability, with all of the finite resources we have in the world at our disposal, how should they be utilized? And the argument that comes out of the Austrian economists, out of Ludwig von Mises in particular, is to say that we solve this with the mechanism of price. In other words, what people are willing to bid for is how valuable something is. If you just ask someone how valuable something is, they'll say, oh yeah, it's pretty valuable, whatever. Like when Peter Schiff went to go and talk to the people coming out of Walmart. And Peter Schiff said to people, do you think people in Walmart should be paid more? And people are like, oh yeah. And they said, okay, well, how much would you be willing to add to your bill to cover that? And they're like, oh, nothing, right? So the way that you separate people's emotionally abstract preferences from what they actually value in a tangible way is you say, what value are you willing to part with in order to get this other value, right? So the old example is that you, Colin, have a pen and I have $1. And we're both willing to exchange that. What that means is that you value my $1 more than you value your pen, and I value your pen more than I value my $1. And this could be a pen and an orange. It doesn't really matter. And so price is a way of figuring out where the scarce resources in the world should go for maximum benefit to society. And that doesn't mean that everything has to be. Yeah, no, I'm explaining it to the people who, from your side, who end up listening to this. And of course, I've got a whole bunch of new listeners who need to hear this kind of stuff as well. So the price mechanism empirically measures how much value there is in a particular good or service or whatever, or charitable donation, right? Like if I'm a charity and I say, give me money and I will help so many people no longer be homeless. And let's say you run a charity, and let's say your charity is twice as good at it as my charity. Well, then you can sort of put that in your flyers, or you can put that in your mail outs or your emails or whatever, and you can say, look, Steph's charity only helped 150 people become non-homeless. They've only rescued 150. I rescued 300 people with exactly the same amount of money. So people will donate more to you rather than to me, as they should, because you are able to show a better return for their charitable dollar by helping more people, which is the case we just made with the Syrian refugees, that you can help 12 to 13 times of them if you send the money to the Middle East rather than if you bring the Syrian refugees or whoever over to Western countries. So all of this is why, without price and without supply and demand and without a free market environment to allocate resources or to measure the actual value, the tangible value. My daughter says, I'd like to buy these crayons. And I'm like, well, you have money, you can make that choice. Now, if she'd like to buy it if I pay for it, then absolutely she wants it. Why not? They're free crayons to her, right? But if I say, well, it's your money, then it's like, ooh, okay, well, now I have to start limiting my resource consumption because I actually have to put money where my desire is. And money, or the cost of acting on your desire, is what limits the consumption of resources and makes sure that waste stays at a minimum. And if you take money and price and supply and demand out of the equation, then I think that human desires spread like a cancer and eat up the planet as a whole. And that's the end of my filibuster, and you can take it from here.
Okay, well, I'll just go through a couple of things there. The reason I asked you how many biros you have was because you mentioned that people have infinite desires. Obviously, I'm sure you don't have an infinite number of biros. In other words, you only have the amount of biros that you actually usefully need and no more. So I think the idea of people have infinite wants is a little bit of a moot point there.
No, but sorry to interrupt, but that's because I want other things. So I'm not going to buy infinite biros because that means I can't buy anything else because I spent all my money on biros. It doesn't mean that I don't have limitless desires if I don't have unlimited one thing, because that would mean I don't get to satisfy my desire in other things.
Yeah, but if you had $1 billion, you're not going to go out and spend $1 million on biros, because they're useless. They're just in the way. And this brings me to the point actually of human needs and wants, which is probably essential to a lot of what I'm saying here. Generally the argument people say is that if you take away money from the world, then everyone's going to go crazy. Like you said yourself, people are going to strip the earth bare and they're going to just grab whatever they can, what they need. Okay, I believe that is completely false, and why the reason for that is that if you expand that idea into the future, you'll see that this doesn't happen. That people will eventually behave sensibly within what they can possibly handle. For example, let me finish. For example, if you say from tomorrow onwards, all potatoes are free, right? That you never have to pay for potatoes again, okay? Or what will happen is everyone's going to run out tomorrow and grab probably as many bags of potatoes as they possibly can, thinking that this is going to end. But of course, if potatoes are free forever, then eventually people will learn that actually I only need to go and take the potatoes that I can carry and the potatoes that I can eat. And other than that, it's a waste of anything else is just wasting it. You know, it's obvious. So who wants to have like a room full of rotten potatoes when you can just go to the store and get fresh ones that you need every day? So the idea of human needs being infinite in that one, it's based on the oppressive nature of the exchange paradigm that we live in, that we think that all we need is just for money to be released or to have as much money, and we're all going to go out and crazy buying things, you know, or going out and taking things. But I believe that won't happen. I believe that people will have access to more of the things that they need, absolutely, and we can produce these things more sustainably and more responsibly than we possibly can now, because our entire ecosystem is being destroyed by inferior production practices. So we can develop the systems to actually produce the goods for everyone in a much more equitable and sustainable way, and give everyone at least the basics that they need. I mean, this is something that's so profound that we should be doing, is that the fact that we're even arguing and saying that we shouldn't be doing that is I don't know, it's like a slow form of genocide. It's like saying that there are people in the world who don't deserve what I have.
Wait, are you saying that I'm arguing for a genocidal position?
I'm not saying you personally, Stefan. I'm saying that as we're strongly advocating, or as people who are strongly advocating the exchange system, what they're actually doing is they're depriving other people through enforcing that exchange.
No, you used the word genocide.
Yeah,
you said
sure.
The position that I was arguing for is a genocidal position.
Yeah, well, not you personally. I'm talking about the idea of the exchange paradigm market system is predicated on basically, it's a predatorial system that we're predating on each other, and people are suffering as a result. And like billions of people are suffering as a result. And I'm not just talking about people who are starving in the desert. I'm talking about people who are suffering untold financial stress. And this is very, very real, and it's all over the world. There, I can feel it in almost every person I talk to. I know plenty of people are well off, but unfortunately, it's not the case for 90% of people. A lot of people are struggling, and the whole financial stress of living is actually it's killing people. It's literally killing people.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean.
We don't
Life
need to do
expectancy
that,
still continues to go up in the West. What is killing people?
Pardon?
Well, life expectancy still continues to go up in the West. I'm just not sure what you mean when you say it's killing people.
I'm talking about financial stress in the West. I'm talking about this impacts on people's lives, on people's relationships on a daily basis, and the effect is
I agree with you there. Yeah, no, I agree with you there.
Yeah,
I actually did a video a while back ago where I was talking about how one of the reasons I think people are getting obese in the West is because they're so stressed by a completely unsustainable and economically destructive system. So yeah, I'm completely with you. The system that we have right now is completely horrendous. But let me jump back to something again. So you say that when people have everything for free, at some point they will begin to limit their desire. Mm-hmm. Now that's kind of a big gamble. Right? I mean, because you say, well, if potatoes, let me finish. So you say if potatoes are free, people will go out and try and grab every single potato that they can possibly get a hold of. So if you make everything free, then people will try and grab and hoard and get as much as humanly possible. And of course, that will create shortages, which then will have to produce more and consume more resources. How long do you think that phase would last for people? Because that seems to me kind of like, and this is not to compare the system you're talking about with communism, but with communism there was like, okay, we need this all-powerful dictatorship of the proletariat. But don't worry, after a while the state will wither away and we'll have a free society. It's like, actually that magic bit in the middle sort of has some concern for me, right? Because I'm very interested in making sure that we have as many resources as possible available for future generations. You know, we do borrow the earth from those who come after us, as I'm sure you would agree. And so this bit where we make everything free and everybody consumes as much as humanly possible, how long, like I'm trying to think, so let's say I had 1,000 Apple Watches, and I went into a poor neighborhood, or any neighborhood for that matter, and I said, here, have a free Apple Watch to everyone. How long would it take before I'd given out enough Apple Watches to satisfy the entire planet? I got to think that's billions of Apple Watches. I can't think of many people who would say, no, I don't want an Apple, or whatever it is that people would like. And so how long would this phase of consuming as much as possible last, and what would the planet look like after that?
Okay, well, what you're talking about there is like a Black Friday situation. You know, the idea is that the mentality of that is coming from the mentality of Black Friday sales, where people are running out and trampling on each other. The idea, for instance, if you take the example of the Apple Watch, where if you're going to have an Apple Watch, like, okay, maybe it would be nice to have an Apple Watch, but who wants 20 Apple Watches? Who wants, like, 30 Apple Watches? What's the point of having that, you know? It'd be nice to have one, and maybe if it breaks, it'd be nice to get another one, okay? But that's all you need. So the point is that people behave reasonably and responsibly once you give them a chance, and once they feel that there is enough of everything they need. Now, okay, I'm not really necessarily talking about Apple Watches here. I'm talking about basic foodstuffs. I'm talking about basic requirements, shelter, heat, energy, all these basic things. Everyone in the planet should be fucking entitled to that now. We've bloody earned this, you know. We've been here long enough. We're very, very smart. We've been able to solve a huge amount of problems. But here we are, we're still like chucking at each other and pecking at the fucking place like hens. And it's ridiculous. We can all supply this thing to each other if we just have a little bit of understanding, a little bit of a better education about who we are, what the world is about, what our life is about. It's not about fucking Black Friday, or it's not about buying the LED TV. Life is about living. It's about being happy. It's about being with people. It's about caring for other people and caring for the other creatures who live on this planet. This, Stefan, is the important stuff. The economic theory and all that stuff is just a game. It's a sham. It's a layer on top of our lives that we don't need anymore.
Well, actually, I completely disagree with you there, Colin. In fact, I think that people like you who want to charge around or organizing the world's resources, I don't exactly know how. If it's not going to be voluntary, I assume it's going to be coercive. I view you as extremely dangerous people, because I ask you clear questions and I try to get clear answers, and I just get these emotional Hallmark cards, blarps of emotions, and it would be nice if, and we bloody well earned it, and we've solved lots of problems, so let's all pull together. This is all dangerous sloganeering. The resources in the world need to be applied very intelligently to solve human problems. And just you having a feeling that things are going to work out, like I asked you a very clear question. You said, look, people are going to start to hoard and grab as many resources as they can as soon as they're free. And I said, okay, well, that's pretty dangerous for the planet. How long would that last? And you go on this big, long speech about how you'd like it if everyone had enough to eat. Well, guess what, Colin? Everyone would like it if people have enough to eat, but your feelings aren't going to be enough to do it. You have to think things through. You have to understand how things are going to work. You tend to just you tell me to fuck off, or you tell people to fucking do this and fucking do that. I mean, that's dangerous demagoguery. You've got to actually know what you're talking about and how things are going to actually work. Because if it's going to take 10 years for people to realize that they don't have to get everything that they want, well, there'll be no planet left after 10 years of producing a billion iPads and a billion Apple Watches and a billion 4-bedroom houses. I mean, there'll be no planet left. We'll be living on the moon, less than the moon. People will probably be eating the moon too, thinking it's cheese. So I think that you do actually have to figure out what it is that's going on in your system. And saying, well, that's enough with this damn theory, enough with this middle-class economics. It's all just words. No, these are important things. It's like, to hell with double-blind experiments. Let's just, squeeze some venom into people's mouths. I'm sure it'll make them feel better. I, of course, like you, want the world to be a happy and peaceful and productive place. And the people who are starving to death are not exactly drowning in an excess of free market, right? The people who are out there in Africa, the people who are out there in the Middle East, the people in Egypt who are trying to struggle by on $2 a day, they're living in theocratic or oligarchical dictatorships where they don't have the choice to accumulate resources, where the governments are relentlessly corrupt, where corporations and foreign aid drown the entire environment in weaponry and destroy local agriculture by dumping food on their local markets and so on. All of this is happening in the world. And you need to know what theories and how these theories are actually going to play out. Because whenever I try and press you on specifics, you kind of just go off on these speeches about how you want the world to be a better place. Well, okay, let's just take that as a given that every decent person wants the world to be a better place. But getting upset or avoiding answers or telling me to fuck off is not how you're going to get the world to be a better place. And the last thing I'd say is we do have a test of what happens when people get infinite resources, or at least everything's pretty much for free. And there are two areas in that. One, of course, is the corporate welfare state, which is where, companies like Boeing and Intel get billions of dollars in government subsidies, or the banks get huge amounts of government subsidies. That's not good, and I'm not saying you agree with that. But on the other side, there's the welfare state. Now, the welfare state gives people $50,000 or $60,000 or $70,000 worth of free stuff. Now, throughout most of human history, this was completely incomprehensible and utterly impossible. And so my concern is that when we look at let's give people free stuff, we already have an example of that, and it's called the welfare state, where people get the kind of goods and resources and medical care and services and housing and everything that you could possibly imagine that would have been impossible to the very richest person not even 25 or 50 years ago. They get free cell phones, they get free access to computers, they get free internet, they get free phones, they get free televisions, they get their housing is taken care of. They get all the and how is this free environment, this environment of free stuff, how is it working out for the work ethic of big corporations? Well, very badly. And how is it working out for the work ethic and family structure of really poor people? We are not a species, and I don't argue that. I don't think there's any species. You can look at the mouse experiments, the mouse utopia experiments for more on this. We are not a species that does well when limitations are removed. We have evolved in situations of scarcity where we have to make rational choices about satisfying our demands, deferring our gratification, figuring out where we should apply our scarce resources. And without the price signals to do that, it's all just going to be random or centrally coercive. So this idea that somehow if everything becomes free, we have environments where we can see that working out. And if you look at the inner cities, and if you look at what happens to government education, which is, quote, free for the vast majority of people in the poor communities who are going to it, who don't pay anything close to the taxes it takes to produce it, we do have a situation where people are getting a whole bunch of stuff for free, and it seems to be turning into a living Dantean ninth level of hell right before our eyes. So excuse me if I push back a little bit on some of this stuff, but it seems to me like we have examples of the kind of free stuff that you're talking about, and it seems to be pretty god-awful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sorry, you went quite a long tirade there, but I just wanted to say that I did actually answer the original question. I wouldn't answer it specifically, but of course, because obviously we've never done this before, and everything hasn't been made free before, and certainly in the climate that we live in now. And yes, it will take time probably for people to begin to behave responsibly, but of course people will behave responsibly when things become available freely to them. Because it just becomes a matter of practicality. What's the point of having?
But how do you know? How do you know that's going to happen? How do you know? How do you know? Because again, the welfare state's an example of people not acting. When people have excess food, they tend to get fat. When people have excess resources, they tend to get lazy. They tend not to work. So how do you know it's going to happen?
No, that's not. But if you have things that are free within the current system that we have now, then it's what's the best way to describe it? It's like it's a gift. Okay, it's a gift, and you want to grab it as much as possible. Like for instance, let's say they're giving away free TVs down the road. Okay, people are going to run down and get loads of free TVs, for instance. And the reason they're doing that is not because they're free, but because they cost money the rest of the time. Do you understand the difference?
We have almost 60 years of the welfare state in America, and that is not a short amount of time. And the welfare state has destroyed particularly in the black community, has destroyed the two-parent family, has destroyed work ethic, has destroyed and blighted entire communities. You have thugs and drug users in these ghettos, not all, but a lot. You've got black kids being born out of wedlock at a rate of 73%, whereas way back in the 20s it was like 20 or 30%.
All right, okay.
And so here we have 60 years. You say, oh, well, when people get enough free stuff, then they'll be fine and better. Here we have a 60-year experiment where things still seem to be getting worse and not better.
That's because they're marginalized, they're socially marginalized people, and they're still living fairly close to the breadline. So they're obviously not feeling very bloody good about themselves at the moment. So you can't blame them for going out and drinking or maybe taking drugs or something like that to try and ease the pain. These are people who are in pain, Stefan. I'm sure they don't want to be in that situation. Of course, we have the issue of unemployment, which is creeping. We've seen what's happened in places like Detroit. This is absolute, just the heart has been completely gutted out of many communities because of that. We've seen this happening in England
and
as well.
And you do understand that they have almost infinitely more wealth than any other human group throughout history in terms of the resources available to them.
Well, I'm sure they don't feel very wealthy.
I'm not talking about their feelings, Colin. I'm talking about the empirical, objective fact that they have $50,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 worth of benefits showered upon them, which is more money than almost every single slice and dice of human population anywhere across the world, any other time throughout history. We've had a 60-year concentrated effort to shower untold wealth and human capital and intellectual capital and mechanical capital and housing capital. We have had a concentrated monsoon of resources pouring onto a community. And there's very strong arguments that it's worse off now than when we started. So the idea that abundance is going to create virtue is not supported and is directly contradicted by this experience. And it troubles me, Colin, that you just wave it away. Well, they're unhappy. They don't want to be doing it. How do you know? How do you know? You just wave away these things, which are significant arguments against your position, as if they're just irrelevant or unimportant, or you can just make up these magic spells called, well, they're just unhappy and they're marginalized and blah, blah, blah. Come on, you understand this is a serious pushback on your position. You might find a way around it, but you can't just wave it away.
You have to understand, Stefan, that there's a big difference between something being free today in our current market system and everything being free and everything being equal. Let's call it, the best, for the want of a better word, a self-organizing society where everyone has open access to what they need, okay? I'm not talking about when you have certain things free or certain people who are getting things for free in a market system, it creates friction, it creates tension between the attitudes, I suppose, for getting free things. But when everything is free, when everything is normally like that, people grow up in that system, they grow up in the world, they always know that food is always free, they always know that their house is free, that they're always going to have energy and free. If this happens, fast forward for 5 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. If this is the norm, becomes the norm in society, of course, people aren't going to abuse it because there's nothing to abuse. Understand that?
Are you saying that the welfare state is not the norm? Hang on. Are you saying that 60 years of the welfare state is not the norm in the inner cities in America?
No, of course not the norm. The problem is not the welfare state. The problem is all the crap that's around us. Understand? The crap that's creating
all the crap that's around us? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to understand about that. That's not a statement that I have in the fact.
The fact that these people were one time expected to exchange their labor in order to give them food, basically, that now that they've been denied the access to that labor, and then they're kind of saying, well, they're really like they're sweeping a brush at the problem, sweeping money at the problem, really just to try and make it go away. But the problem is that these people are still there, and they don't have. They're marginalized and
okay, fantastic. So providing people additional resources does not solve social problems. I think we're right back to where we started. Because you're saying, well, if you give people additional resources, you'll be solving significant problems. And now you're saying, well, okay, you've given a lot of trillions of dollars have been poured into poor communities in America and through foreign aid around the world, and it doesn't solve their problems because they're marginalized. I didn't even know what that means in particular. But so yes, additional resources doesn't solve social problems, and in fact can make them substantially worse. And this is why my concern is that if you say, well, we can solve all social problems or human problems with more and more resources being fired at a particular group, yeah, now you're saying, okay, but you can't solve certain social problems with additional resources.
I didn't say that, Stephen.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I didn't say that. I didn't say any of those things, actually, Stephen, about firing additional resources. And also, I would also probably point out that probably a lot of the poor people
hang on.
have actually
You said if things
really
are free,
benefited.
hang on. You said if things are free, then people will get better and they will not abuse them. And my point is that if we look at the welfare state, massive amounts of wealth are effectively free for people. And over 2 or 3 generations, these communities have tended to get worse and more corrupt and more violent and more unstable families and so on. And so if making things free makes people better, then that would be an example against it.
So what would you have the people who are in the welfare system, what would you have them do? I mean, you think they're just lazy?
Well, see, I'm not a central planner. I don't have to have them do anything. What would I have you do with your day tomorrow? Okay. Well, whatever you choose to do, you can have your day. I mean, I'm not here to tell people what to do. I'm not this giant chess player who moves resources and people around the world to make some utopia of my own imagination. I would set them free, of course, right? I mean, I would say you are free to live in society. You're free to take charity. You're free to start businesses. Rip down all the barriers that currently exist to these people. Get rid of these god-awful government unions, educational systems, and give people the liberty and the freedom to build their own lives as they see fit, to build their own communities as they see fit, to help each other out as they see fit. They can run their own lives. I don't need to look at them as pawns on my chessboard of future utopianism. All that needs to happen is the barriers to their productivity and their success and their achievements need to be ripped down so that we're not stuck in these tiny fences of overregulation and these tiny fences of taxation and manipulation, corporate welfare and the military-industrial complex and the war on drugs and the prison-industrial complex. Just set people free and let them do what they will.
And what are these barriers to their own productivity? What are you referring to there?
The barriers towards their own productivity? 1/3 of Americans need a goddamn license to have a job. What the hell is up with that? I mean, give them their own streets, give them their own schools back. Let them own it. Let them have it. Let them keep it. And let them live there as masters in their own domain, rather than serfs of a welfare complex that exists to funnel taxpayers' money to bureaucrats rather than actually help the poor. And if there are poor that need to be helped, and certainly there are, let people who are the most motivated and the most capable go in and help those. Those are not welfare agencies where 70 to 80% of the money never even makes it to the poor. Those aren't the government teachers who anytime you start to think about the kids might do better off if they don't have 2.5 months off in the summer. They go on strike and they start screaming blue murder as if you're taking away their kidney rather than just taking away an archaic requirement for an agricultural society that no longer exists for kids to work in the summers on the farms. So just give the people back their own communities. Just stop running and managing everything from on top with all the power of the state and all the uncaringness of the state, and let the most motivated people who can make the most difference go into those communities and take down everything that stands between these people and what it is they could achieve with their life.
Okay. Well, you're completely ignoring the fact that obviously the whole employment has pretty much opportunities of employment have really rapidly decreased in the last 200 years. Obviously,
how do you know? Wait, how do you know I'm completely? Hang on. How do you know? What a presumptuous statement to say that I've completely ignored it.
Because when we're talking about,
I just did a debate with Paul Craig Roberts. I just did a debate with Paul Craig Roberts where we talked about systemic unemployment. I've done shows with Peter Schiff where we talk about systemic unemployment. It would be a lot more polite, Colin, if you asked me what I thought about that, rather than assuming I've never even dealt with that topic.
Okay, I'm sure you have.
But because you're a utopian central planner, you can tell me everything about what I think and never ask me a question.
Okay, I'll ask you a question then. It makes you happier. what do you think then about, if you're going to give all these people jobs, what on earth are they going to be doing?
Did you say I would give all these people jobs?
I said, if you want to have all these people working who are on the welfare state, who are you're criticizing so much, even though you're not offering an alternative solution, what are you going to do with these people? What are you going to have them doing? Are they going to be all sweeping the streets?
See, again, you because you're a monomaniacal central planner kind of personality, you think that I am the one who has to figure out what everyone is going to do with his or her life. But because I'm actually interested in human liberty, I don't care what people do with their lives as far as I'm going to organize and tell everyone what to do with everything that they're, you're going to be a street sweeper, and you're going to be a surgeon, and you're going to be an aircraft mechanic, and you're going to be a mime, right? I want people to be free and they can choose their own lives. And this has been shown repeatedly that when you cut welfare, people just go out and get jobs. And of course, we need to have jobs be created in local communities, and the best way to do that is to stop doing everything that made the jobs go overseas. Stop printing so much money. Stop allowing such a stranglehold of regulations where, tens of thousands of regulations get created every couple of years, which further strangles the capacity for people to own businesses. Stop with all this ridiculous licensing where you have to go and beg some bureaucrat for permission to put bread on your family's table. Just get out of the way of people and they flourish. It's sort of like saying, if you take this big giant ceiling over this garden, how are you going to make all the flowers grow? It's like, it's not my job to make the flowers grow. It's my job to get the stupid barriers between the flowers and the sunlight that they feed on, and they grow of their own accord. I don't need to be in there pushing and pulling and poking them.
Yeah, but you're not addressing the fact, Stefan, that the whole world has changed in the last 100 to 200 years. It's the same thing that...
See, again, you're telling me what I do and don't stress and do and don't know. You cannot get away from this idea that you know everything. And you can tell everybody what they think and what they stress and what they don't. Now, you can make a case that the world has changed, but you can't tell me what I do and don't think about it. And you certainly can't tell me that I'm not aware that the world has changed. But you see, you tell people what they think. You tell people what their experience is. This is why central planning is so tempting for you.
Okay. Right. Look, to be honest, Stefan, it's getting quite late here, and I'm getting a bit tired, so I'm probably not making the best sense at the moment. But let me just try and summarize my points, okay, for your listeners anyway. The Free Will Charter is something that I'm advocating. It might be loosely related to what people know as resource-based economy. I believe, and there's plenty of others who are following what we're doing also believe that the world will be a better place if we actually remove the market system. That pretty much it's technically redundant, and it is possible to create abundance now. And I do believe, yes, I can't prove it, but I do believe that people will behave responsibly once they actually are accustomed to living in a paradigm which is abundant, and people are cooperating and people helping each other in the community. I think that's absolutely possible. I also think that the notion of the hands-off free market system is certainly better than what we have now, but I believe that we should be looking to actually liberate the entire species instead of just liberating just one little operating section of it. I believe we can do a lot better than what we're doing.
And Colin, I just wanted to point out that, of course, I just wanted to point out that in a free market system, if you can find a way to produce things for free, you'll totally win. Right? Like if you can produce a Lamborghini for no resource consumption, whatever that means, right? Everything's free, right? Yeah. The fact that resources are finite means that everything that you produce with those resources is something else you can't produce. So it's hard to imagine that things can be perfectly free. But if you can produce a Lamborghini for $0, right? There's two Lamborghini dealerships in a free market environment. Number one, there's Steph's Lamborghini dealership where I sell them for $100,000 or whatever. Right? It's probably too little, but whatever it is. In the free market, it's $1,000 for a Lamborghini once you get rid of regulations. And so there's Steph's free market Lamborghini dealership, and then there's Colin's Lamborghini dealership. Now I charge $1,000 because I I'm into middle class economics and apparently hate the poor, but you charge $0 because you found a way to produce Lamborghinis for no resource consumption and no reduction of limited resources whatsoever. And so in a free market environment, I don't think there'll be a big lineup for my $1,000 Lamborghinis when you're producing Lamborghinis for free. So I don't think you need any other system in a free market system or even in the current system. If you can produce Lamborghinis for free, then you can go and make those Lamborghinis for free, and you can go and get them in the free market, and you'll put the existing Lamborghini and frankly all car dealerships out of business, and you'll end up ruling the market. And then you'll end up being able to produce more and more things for free, and free potatoes and all these things. So I don't know why you're waiting for anything. Just go and do it and take over and displace anything that has a price on it.
It's already happening. It's already happening. What you're talking about, okay, we can't make the Lamborghinis for free yet, but this is already happening. You look up Jeremy Rifkin, look up zero marginal cost economy. This is already happening. It's getting so much easier and
well, then why are you talking about wanting to displace the free market when you can just go and produce this stuff for free? Why do you need to be an activist? Just go make stuff for free. Like the guys who came up with cell phones didn't need to call into shows like this and say, well, you know, rotary dial phones and landlines and phones with cords that are attached that you got to dick all the way around. They're redundant and they're technologically obsolete. What they did was they went out and made way better phones, and they didn't need to go and lecture people and say, well, we've got to get rid of the whole rotary dial paradigm. Just make shit that's way better. And don't worry about activism. Like, why would you bother having a website and trying to get signatures? Like, the people who made really great new phones, they don't need, like, the old phones that were the size of the Kleenex box that you had to point at a satellite and you couldn't be under a tree and stuff. Those guys didn't set up websites. The guys who made better new phones, they didn't set up websites. And they didn't say, well, we got to get all these signatures because they're these really crappy old phones and we've got all these great new phones. All they did was make great new phones and displace all the old phones. I don't know why you'd bother being an activist and trying to lecture people about how the world should be. Just go and make the stuff that's so great and displace everyone who's already there.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's the way it is now, Stefan. I'm saying that's the way it is going. You know yourself how much cheaper it is to buy incredibly your phone or whatever is incredibly complicated and incredible a device it is, and now you can pick them up for less than $100. The point is that the costs of everything are coming down anyway, so this is the way it's going. Right.
Okay, then I'm going to have to look. Now, if this is inevitable, there's not much point for it. You know, the sun's going to rise tomorrow. We don't need a philosophy show about that. But I really appreciate your call, and thanks for staying up so late. Let's move on to the next call. If this is going to be inevitable, then there's no point in having a debate about it. But thanks a lot for your call, man. I appreciate it.
No problem, Stefan. Okay, have a good evening. Good luck.
Take care. All right.